Hi, Jose.
Hello, Samir. Thanks for having me.
Can you just give us a little bit of background on who you are in the world of sports and what you've been up to?
Well, thanks for the question.
No problem.
I've been involved in sports for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Currently working for two organizations. So Y Sport, a small consultancy working with brands and national governing bodies, trying to bring them together. Also teaching at university, at SOAS University, Center of International Studies and Diplomacy, teaching the students how to use sport, because as you might know, sport can be used as a tool for good. Could be something that everybody should know more about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before, I've been involved in many different projects, and always struck me how determined our athletes. So I'm the son of a former athlete. I played amateur basketball until I got injured.
Right.
So very passionate about athletes' rights and what happened with athletes after they retire. And that was the topic of my dissertation at my master's degree.
Oh, interesting.
And you'll be surprised. I mean, this is years ago, but at that time, many football players in the UK were good case studies of what a bad post-career could look like in terms of betting, suicide, bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm really passionate about.
And you said you're the son of an athlete as well?
Yeah, so my dad was an athlete when he was young. I think his best performance was being sixth of the country, and he's back in Spain in long jumps. So always been very passionate about track and field, and you learn that once you get an injury, you're out. All the money goes away, all the support from the government goes away, and you're on your own, and you need to transition. And in the case of my dad, was education. So that's why I think my career has always been married between sport and education. Which I think is the best tool you can have as an athlete for your future. And also been involved with international federations in the past, helping them develop new sports like basketball, 3-on-3. So it's interesting to be involved when nobody really is interested in a particular side of that sport. And one example is 3-on-3 basketball. So years ago, I got involved in this project, which was let's create an online tool that national federations can learn from. Athletes, coaches, basketball players can learn more about the sport and get interested in and try to help develop the sport. And at the time, I remember having conversations in a big, convention event from FIFA with national associations, and them not being very interested at the time because the sport was not in the Olympics.
I was just thinking, it's funny that there are some similarities between sports and entertainment. They're both potentially careers that can be shorter lived, let's say, than more traditional careers. Like if you're working in a bank or an organization, you may be there or in these careers for 30, 40 years, but it's quite rare in a lot of sports to be able to last 30, 40 years at the top of the game, or even as an entertainer.
Through my career, even doing research and doing interviews with Olympic and Paralympic athletes, I've met athletes who said, look, I'm getting maybe 30,000 euros through the scholarship that I get from the government. If I don't have that, or if I lose it because I'm injured, I don't know what I'm going to do. Because it's very hard to think what to do when your whole mental, career, everything has been in one shot, which is be the best at the sport where you have the skills for. So it's very difficult to transition. And you're absolutely right. The two fields of entertainment and sport, short careers, there's only very few people, even though in the media it looks like there's hundreds and thousands of athletes that they can make their living from sport
to last as well,
and to last for years. And there's not that many in reality, and any injury can take you out of the game. So you're spot on. If you start from a young age building a brand, if you start from a young age educating yourself, and if you have any money doing the right investments, which is something that not necessarily they're educated on, athletes, then you can learn a lot.
Brilliant. So you said previously you were involved with sports brands and stuff as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the current company I work for, Y Sport, they work directly with brands, media companies or international federations or national governing bodies that they're looking to engage with a brand on a strategic level, which means we're not advertising agency where you just know that certain football club has the kit, front of the kit is going to be empty next year, and they're looking for someone to spend a few million to put that logo on that shirt. So that's not what we do.
Okay.
So Sally and Sally, who run the agency, what they do is have deep conversations with both brands and governing bodies or right holders, and just try to understand their values, what they're trying to achieve in the next 5 years, and see if they can work together. So examples of these could be working with UEFA, working with, at the time when we started working with UEFA a couple of years ago, they were trying to improve and have more knowledge on women's football, and they've done very well. So at the time they were not seen as the leading organization supporting women's football. So they had a very good initiative, which is, let's go and try to understand better women's sport. Let's talk to organizations and brands that have been engaged with women's sport before, and see how can we adapt that and get a strong proposition that can help us in the future develop women's football and attract the right brands to work with us.
Right.
And you might have seen recently loads of deals done by UEFA with cool brands like Nike. So we can see Visa. We can see that education and this kind of work between brands and right holders is much better and long term than just trying to find someone to pay you money to put your logo in a t-shirt.
Absolutely, yeah. So in terms of what we do at Globatalent, looking at up and coming talent and how that develops and how we're essentially able to help people build careers and build lifestyles when otherwise the situations and kind of, I guess, opportunities are quite limited. How does that affect where you've had experience? For instance, you work quite heavily with the Paralympics and other organisations. Where do you see the marriage? Is it something that will be taken up or will it take time? What's the adoption rate of things like this, do you think? How open are people to having a new way of developing careers? Yeah,
it's a very good question, because I've come across many conversations regarding, technology and sports and how easy or how difficult it is for a traditional organization with white British middle class, leaders to understand or to embrace anything new that could change the whole game in their sport or on their organization. So having that in mind, I think what Globatalent is offering, it's a completely different way for a sport to develop in the future, and therefore that's why more organizations should engage with someone that they could trust. I think that's the key challenge for a technology company to build trust with sporting organizations, because everything tends to be done through their networks, through their experience. They tend to work with the same brands, with the same organizations they have worked in the past. And it's very difficult to break into this type of organizations. They might have an innovation manager, they might have someone who is in charge of technology, which they will understand what technology or Globatalent is trying to achieve. However, leaders of organizations tend not to trust anything they don't understand. So I think it will be an education process. We need people in leading positions to understand better technology and sport and how they two marry to each other. And we've seen a few examples of, for example, sporting federations investing directly themselves in a technology to make sure that technology helps their sport to grow. So I think it's an education long-term process. And this is the kind of barriers you encounter as a technology company.
You've been, as we mentioned, quite heavily involved with a number of sports organisations in some different areas. Just on that point about innovation, In your opinion, from your experience, how heavily is innovation invested in within these organisations? Is it like just the VAR's introduction where people are like, let's innovate the sport? Or is there real conscious effort to push things further along for the development of things overall?
The challenge is they think they're sporting organizations and they're not looking at digital in the right way. So they're thinking, yes, we need to have a digitally advanced website, a digitally advanced ticketing system, but they're not really having a digital transformation themselves.
Right.
So it's always projects, it's always some investments, but it's not their business becoming a digital transformative business. And that you can see because nothing is changing in the sport. It's still the same sport. It's very difficult for them to think, let's change the mindset. Let's see how can this sport evolve and engage new generations which are not necessarily interested in traditional sports, for example. So
because there's even different sports being added to the Olympics each year and stuff. There's more things coming, more funding for things. But where is it enough to just add the sports to the Olympics, or do we need to invest in how people are seeing them with a new age?
There is a need for much more investment. And if you compare what banks are investing right now in innovation and technology compared to what the sporting organizations are, is marginal. So that gives you a good idea of how banks are reacting to challenger brands and technology companies of fintechs. I think the challenge is in sporting organizations, they haven't been challenged yet, or they think they haven't been challenged. Even though they now in the sports and entertainment sector, they're not the sports only anymore because they're competing with, cinema,
media companies,
Netflix, everything else that is happening for, kids and young people time. So they haven't realized, and the reason is they don't know it yet, or some of them they don't know it, they don't think about it. But banks and other businesses, they have realized, so they're heavily involved investing and hire the best talent they can find in tech on innovation to make sure they are the best and the most advanced in their field.
Wouldn't it be interesting if one of the organisations, the governing bodies, decided to offer people an insight into their own sports rather than a media company? Maybe that's the difference on where certain companies are looking for innovation and certain companies are not necessarily going with the times.
You're absolutely right. And I think the key is trust. I think businesses these days, they find or they identify certain partners they trust and they work with them and they open their business for them to be even showcased and broadcasted online. While sporting organizations are still a bit reticent to open their organization and show what they do and, what athletes do, how they work. There's still a bit of a myth or a challenge how these organizations work. And having been working for a few years now with different, national federations and international federations, you can easily see which ones are more open than others in terms of trusting an external partner. For the last nearly 2 years, I've been working with LTA, so Tennis for Britain. And they are going through challenging but exciting time of trying to tell the world and the UK that they are not a very old-fashioned sport for upper middle class that can afford to play tennis on a
because it's generally seen as a more affluent sport,
sport, elite sport, people that can pay to go to Wimbledon. But for the last few couple of years, they have a new senior executive team. They have been engaging with great companies like the one I work for and other innovative organizations to try to change how tennis is perceived, who likes to play tennis, and why not kids from ethical minority backgrounds cannot play tennis or cannot become tennis players. So that's the journey they're in at the moment. So it's great to see that they're prepared to recognize that they had an issue or a challenge and try to say we need to do something about it. And this is the journey they're in. It's an amazing opportunity to be able to work together with them. But similarly, in the past when we worked with UEFA, again, a very traditional organization.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they decided a few years ago, we need to invest in women's football.
Right.
We need to educate ourselves. And that helps.
Yeah. The challenges of different sports and organisations depending on the perceptions in society. So it's interesting to see where people are looking to try and improve their areas.
Yeah. Similarly, when I was working for the International Paralympic Committee, and I have been involved with Paralympic sport, you also see that for them, women was a very important part as athletes.
For the Paralympics.
For the Paralympics, yes. So athletes always have been like at the center of everything they do.
Yeah.
Apart from having athletes commissions, etc.
Yeah.
They always had in mind the athlete, because at the end of the day, without the athletes and these, amazing performances we see from Paralympic athletes, there wouldn't be anybody watching Paralympic sport, because that's their unique selling point. These amazing performances from athletes with special abilities.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that how much they have invested in education, education of the athletes, education of the national Paralympic committees, countries where nobody else is going to do any type of education. They're trying to make sure,
London 2012 was the first time I'd seen or noticed necessarily Paralympics really televised. Yeah. It was a big campaign. You had the Olympics and then you were having withdrawal symptoms of the Olympics. But then there was the Paralympics, and this was equally as exciting. There was something more to get behind, and it was because it was, the marketing, the investment behind it, and actually making it something that people would get interested in was significantly more than it had ever been before.
Absolutely. If you don't see it, you don't know it exists.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is something that happens with women's football, and this is something that happened until London 2012 with Paralympic sport, and something I heard me personally while I was in the London 2012 Paralympic Games was, listening to just fans coming into the Olympic Park and just saying, originally we came here to see the park, to see the venues, because obviously we had no idea about Paralympic sport. Yeah. But now that we're here with our kids, because we can afford the tickets, we're very proud, and, we really see the value of how much this means for our kids' future. Yeah. How inspiring, how much is opening their eyes. Yeah. So we're very grateful that we're here. So
it's interesting that, with the heightened exposure of things like the Paralympic Games, there is a real improvement in the opportunities offered to people with special abilities or disabilities as well. So genuinely lucrative careers as an option as a Paralympian. Yeah. Whereas before, if you're a wheelchair basketball player, you probably have to have a full-time job as well. You probably have to do these things. And now if you're actually at the top of your game, you can focus on that as a career. So widening the actual opportunities and providing jobs for people where there weren't before is something I think that's been a great introduction to the world of sport, actually.
Absolutely. And hopefully there will be more inclusion in the sport. So hopefully more sports will realize how important it is to have and develop their Paralympic or parasport side, just for the good and for the growth of the sport.
When you said earlier that you were passionate about the education of post-career risks, what is currently being done or being put in place, or what ideas do you necessarily have with your involvement to safeguard players and improve that? So, we had examples, even extremely sadly, the late Kobe Bryant from a few months ago. Yeah. Almost a lot of the conversations, as much as focusing on his basketball career, which was extremely illustrious, people were almost equally as sad that they weren't going to get to see how good he was after his career, because he had set up such a thing, the first sports player to get an Oscar, becoming an author, and those sort of things as the examples, I guess, of the top of what a post-career could be like. What initiatives are in place to help people not succumb to the risks? I mean,
there is a lot going on, but some initiatives that have been in place for longer. So if you think of the NFL, and NFLPA, they have been like pioneers in supporting athletes' career, because as you know, after a couple of years of being playing in the NFL, you're very likely to be either bankrupt or not in a very good position. So there's the case like recently, for example, the NFL is even trying to learn from what UEFA does.
Right.
So
the organizations
started to talk to each other.
Wow.
Which is
across different sports as well.
Sports.
Fantastic.
And this is something that I think should be happening more. Because I think sports in isolations, they know a lot about their sport, but they don't necessarily know best.
Yeah.
And some good learnings can come from other organizations. And just if you look at organizations like, for example, FIFA or other organizations that they might just take everything themselves, they just tend to be, in my opinion, more of a tick box. Let's create something that is an online program that is going to be delivered to hundreds and thousands of football players at different levels of the sport. And we make sure that it's a safe sport. I think you need to go much farther than that.
Not just give people a document to read,
not just
basically.
document or an online tool to go through. And this is the kind of things that I think certain sports, they get it and they want to lead on transparency and safeguarding. And tennis, for example, is one of the sports that they want to do that. They want to get on the front of safeguarding because I think they understand, like major brands like the NFL, first thing, most important thing is safety. For governing bodies, safety also includes safeguarding, and I think they understand that they now need to be at the forefront of this.
Doing that.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience of the differences between organisations in different countries and safeguarding their athletes? For instance, in Asia with the cricket leagues, or perhaps athletics in China, are there more challenges there that you know of? How different is the progression or speed of progression?
Yeah. Every country, it's a different world.
Right.
That's why organizations like FIFA or other international federations might work with bigger organizations, or the NBA might look for someone like a big technology company to help them implement what they're trying to achieve, because every single country is going to be a different world.
Right,
And, governance will be very different in Asian countries or in African countries than European countries.
Because when you're thinking about this, it ties in quite heavily with politics, with social policy, with even, the way that countries are run, and human rights issues as well, liberal laws and all sorts. So
betting laws and European laws. So there's a lot of things that have an influence on safeguarding or betting or crime. And so I think every country is a different world. Certain continents, obviously, they have similarities than others. But definitely what we touched on before, which is collaboration. I think there's a need for much more collaboration between sporting organizations internationally to make sure that everyone has the latest, the best, on the most robust system in place in terms of safeguarding or safety.
Thank you for that. And a more personal question. You've been involved now, as you said, with a number of global sports organizations, had encounters with athletes and brands alike, and even technology companies. Where's the next steps for you?
Thanks for having me here today, talking about myself and Globatalent. I have been also preparing myself for the future. So the same as an athlete would do, for the last couple of years, I've been teaching here at SOAS University with Dr. Simon Rowe, and in the past with Stuart McDonald at the Center for International Studies and Diplomacy, and trying to educate myself and educate our students on how sport is more than sport, and how much an athlete, French athlete playing in the NBA, can have an influence on educating kids about France. Well, athletes these days, they have a voice, and some of them, because they're very big, like LeBron, they can say what they think, and other athletes, they're not allowed to say what they think, because if they do, they might risk losing their job, because we shouldn't forget the sport is a business, and it's about opportunities. So some athletes will have opportunities, and some other athletes will not, if they're not at the game. I've been involved in sport and diplomacy for the last couple of years, and currently I'm an associate of International Cultural Relations, which is an organization that works directly with countries like Germany or the EU or this council, And what they do is educate the government or the country about how they can use the sport for good.
Right,
so
okay.
you might have heard a lot about soft power and how much Qatar, for example, is using their Qatar 2022 football to try to change a bit the perception people outside Qatar have of their country.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is the kind of things that we teach here at SOAS to our students, to just help them understand how sport can be a tool for good, can be a tool for, branding a country, can be a tool for soft power, but can also be a useful tool if you want to contribute to achieving UN sustainable goals like equality, diversity, etc. So with this in mind, I've been trying to learn myself as much as possible in terms of sport diplomacy, and I think there's a need for the industry to also embrace more what they can learn and what they can achieve by using the sport for a different role.
Interesting. So really pushing to bring sport into a more socially conscious world where people are looking at it in a very different way than just watching a match on TV, but how can this really improve communities and well-being for people worldwide?
Absolutely. And even at athlete level, I've been in touch with athletes that have just contacted me and say, I'm a female professional player. I would like to do something good after my career.
Right.
How do I go about it? So you can see there is a need for even athletes these days to think bigger.
To want to do
something for society in the future. I think it's just the right time for anybody who really cares about athletes and who really cares about sport to get involved and help develop a better future for sport.
Amazing. It seems like with leading athletes and people such as yourself involved with organisations, there's really significant examples being set on how we should at least be thinking and approaching sport in the future.
It's something that obviously struck me from Globatalent, how they're trying to think, the reality. Athletes need funding. It's very difficult for them to secure that funding for their whole career, especially when they're young and they're not on the top of their game. So it's just having that extra funding, having the ability to also create their own funds and their fan community through different and technology ways. I think it's a great idea.
Great thing to do, yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time here. Thank you, Jose.
Thanks for having me.